I used to think betrayal would sound loud, shouting, slamming doors, someone finally losing control. Instead, it sounded like my mother crying softly into a microphone while an entire courtroom listened. We gave her every opportunity. Margaret Hart said, her voice trembling in a way that had been perfected over decades. She chose not to take them. I sat still at the defendant's table, my hands folded, my back straight. I had learned long ago that reacting only fed the story other people wanted to tell about me. My father, Richard Hart, did not speak. He did not need to. When the judge glanced in his direction, my father nodded once. Small, controlled, final. That nod hurt more than my mother's tears. Before the judge could continue, before the weight of that moment fully settled, let me be clear about one thing. This is an original story written by the author of the Revenge Pulse channel, built from familiar social issues with the purpose of helping viewers reflect, heal, and draw meaningful lessons. The content is not intended to depict any real individual. Across the aisle, my brother Nathan sat with his attorney, relaxed, almost bored. His hands were folded the same way mine were, but his posture carried certainty. He looked like someone who believed the room existed to confirm what he already knew. My attorney, Claire Whitman, leaned slightly toward me. "Stay exactly like this," she said quietly. "Let them talk." Nathan's lawyer stood. "Your Honor," he began, smooth and confident. "This is a clear case of financial irresponsibility. The defendant allowed her company to spiral while ignoring legitimate obligations totaling $2,140,000 owed to my client." Margaret let out a quiet sob at the number, not too loud, just enough. I felt the shift then, not fear, not panic, something colder. They were not trying to prove I had failed. They were trying to make everyone else believe it before the truth could catch up. Claire did not interrupt. She did not object. She waited. The judge turned a page, then another. The sound of paper felt too loud in the room. My daughter had so much potential, my mother added, unprompted. We tried to guide her. Guide. That was the word she always used when she meant control. The judge stopped reading. He removed his glasses and placed them carefully on the bench. The silence stretched, heavy and deliberate. "I need counsel to approach," he said. Nathan stood quickly, confidence still intact as he walked forward. Claire rose at the same pace she always moved, unhurried, precise. As they spoke in low voices, I noticed something small but unmistakable. Nathan's shoulders tightened. His lawyer nodded once, then again, too fast. "If you are still listening at this point, if this tension feels familiar in your own life, stay with me. Some stories do not reveal themselves until the moment power shifts." The judge looked up. "I have a question," he said calmly, his gaze settling not on my brother, not on the attorneys, but on me. And in that moment, I knew the story they brought into this courtroom was about to break. People always assumed I came from a broken home. I didn't. That was the part that confused them when the truth finally surfaced. From the outside, the Hart family looked polished, reliable, the kind of family neighbors referenced when they talked about stability. My father, Richard Hart, built his financial firm in the Chicago suburbs on discipline and reputation. He believed order was proof of worth. If something failed, it meant someone had failed first. My mother, Margaret, managed everything else. Dinners, appearances, emotions. She knew when to smile, when to cry, and when silence carried more weight than words. And then there was Nathan. My older brother was never announced as the heir. He didn't need to be. The assumption lived in every room we entered. Nathan spoke, and people leaned in. Nathan stumbled, and people explained it away as potential not yet realized. I learned early where I stood by listening. At dinner one night, I spread a napkin on the table and sketched an idea I had been working on. A way to protect systems from failures people didn't notice until it was too late. My father watched for a moment. "That's a phase," he said, smiling faintly. "You'll grow out of it." My mother laughed softly and reached for the serving dish. "She's always been imaginative." Nathan didn't even look at the napkin. Later, when he mentioned an unfinished project of his own, my father nodded approvingly. "That's vision," he said. "You can't teach that." The praise sat in the air like a rule I hadn't agreed to but was expected to follow. As years passed, the pattern sharpened. Compliments aimed at me always came with conditions. "You're smart," my mother would say. "If only you applied yourself the right way, you could do well." My father added once, "If you didn't insist on making things complicated." Conversations shifted when I entered rooms. Decisions were made without me, then explained after the fact. Nathan was praised for plans. I was questioned for execution. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I just felt misfiled, like a document placed in the wrong drawer and forgotten. When I finally left, there was no argument to remember, no dramatic exit, just distance. And behind me, a family that remained perfectly intact, convinced they had lost nothing at all. I didn't announce my departure. There was no final dinner, no slammed door, no demand to be understood. I just stopped showing up. When I told my parents I was moving, my father nodded like I had informed him of a schedule change. "Do what you think is best," he said. It sounded generous. It wasn't. My mother hugged me longer than necessary. "You'll figure things out," she whispered, the way people speak to someone they expect to come back disappointed. Nathan didn't say anything at all. He smiled once, polite and distant, already certain this wasn't a loss. I married Daniel Brooks 2 years later. He didn't come from money or legacy or expectation. He listened. That alone felt unfamiliar enough to be dangerous. In our first apartment, the table doubled as a desk. My laptop sat between unpaid bills and cold coffee. I worked late and quietly, learning how to build without witnesses. Daniel would look up from the couch and ask, "Did you eat later?" I said, again and again. Some nights he watched me work and said nothing. Other nights he said, "You don't have to prove anything to anyone." "I know." I told him, and I meant, "I know who I'm proving it to." I didn't call my family with updates. When my mother asked how I was doing, I said, "Fine," and left it there. At a holiday gathering, Nathan laughed and said, "Still figuring things out," I smiled back. Something like that. Daniel noticed everything. On the drive home, he said, "They don't see you." "I prefer it that way," I replied. For a long time, silence felt like safety. No expectations, no disappointment, no need to explain why my work mattered or why I trusted myself to build something from nothing. I believed distance was enough. I didn't know it was only buying time. Success didn't arrive with announcements. It came quietly, through confirmations that stopped requiring explanation. Contracts renewed without negotiation. Clients stopped asking if and started asking how soon. 32 people showed up every morning trusting my decisions would keep their work intact. I didn't tell my family any of it. That was intentional. The first shift came through my father. He called one afternoon, his tone casual, measured. "I hear you're consulting now," Richard said. "You should be careful with liability." "I am careful," I replied. He paused. "People like you don't always understand consequences." "People like you?" The words stayed with me long after the call ended. My mother followed a week later. "You sound busy," Margaret said too sweetly. "Are you sure you're not overextending yourself?" "I'm fine," I said. She sighed. "We worry. That's what family does." Then came Nathan. At a holiday dinner, he lifted his glass and smiled. "I heard you finally landed something decent. Work has been steady," I said. His eyes searched my face, sharp and assessing. Steady can be dangerous if you're not prepared. I met his gaze. Prepared is the one thing I don't gamble with. The table went quiet for half a second too long. My mother changed the subject. My father watched me like I had stepped out of line without raising my voice. On the drive home, Daniel spoke first. "They're measuring you now," he said. I noticed. I replied, "That kind of interest doesn't come from pride." "I know," I said. "It comes from inventory." In the weeks that followed, the questions became more specific. Risk, exposure, structure, ownership. They weren't curious anymore. They were evaluating. I kept my answers vague. Technology, consulting, busy. The less I gave them, the sharper their focus became. And for the first time since I left, I felt something tighten in my chest. Not fear. Recognition. They had finally seen that I had built something real, and they didn't like not being in control of it. The call came from Maya, our chief financial officer, early in the morning. "Evelyn," she said, skipping any greeting, "one of our operating accounts has been temporarily restricted." I stood still, phone pressed to my ear. "Restricted how?" "The bank flagged an external filing," she replied. "They say it's procedural. They're asking for clarification." "Clarification of what?" Maya exhaled. "They won't say yet." I thanked her and ended the call without sitting down. A restriction did not mean frozen, but it meant watched. It meant questions would follow. 10 minutes later, my assistant knocked on my office door. "Your 10 o'clock is on the line," she said. He asked if now was a bad time. I picked up. "Evelyn," the client said carefully, "we heard there might be something legal happening on your end." "From where?" I asked. "A consultant we work with," he said. "They mentioned a filing." I chose my words slowly. "There's nothing that affects our work." He paused. "We trust you. But our board doesn't like uncertainty." "I understand." I said, "I'll send documentation by end of day." When the call ended, I stared at my calendar. Payroll was scheduled for the end of the week. 32 people expected consistency, stability, answers. Daniel found me that evening sitting at the kitchen table, laptop open, untouched dinner beside it. "Something happened," he said. "The bank restricted an account," I replied. "And a client heard about a filing that shouldn't exist." He pulled out a chair. "This isn't random." "No," I said. "It's coordinated." The doorbell rang. Daniel stood and returned with a thick envelope, my name printed cleanly across the front. Too clean. I opened it slowly. The words landed one by one. Involuntary petition. Creditor claim. Alleged default. Total amount owed $2,140,000. The creditor listed was my brother. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. Daniel read over my shoulder. "They're trying to bankrupt you. They're trying to make it look inevitable," I said. I sat down and read the filing again. Slower this time. Dates that didn't align. Obligations that never existed. Signatures that looked like mine, but weren't. This wasn't anger. This was planning. I picked up the phone and called Claire Whitman. "I just received a filing." I said, "My brother is claiming a debt that doesn't exist." There was a pause on the line. "They're attempting an involuntary bankruptcy," she said calmly. "Not to win. To contaminate your reputation before the truth can intervene." I closed my eyes. "So this is how they chose to speak," I said. Claire's voice remained steady. "Then we let the record answer them." I looked at the envelope one last time before setting it aside. They weren't attacking my company. They were testing how much damage silence could do before I fought back. Claire asked me to come in that night. Not tomorrow. Not after I had slept. That night. She spread the filing across the conference table, her hands steady, her expression unreadable. "This isn't sloppy," she said. "It's deliberate." "They listed dates from 3 years ago." I replied, Before my company even cleared its first audit. They did that on purpose, Claire said. Old enough to blur memory, recent enough to feel plausible. She tapped one page. $2,140,000. Not a round number, designed to look real. I leaned back in the chair. They're saying I borrowed it. They're saying you defaulted, she corrected. That matters more. I watched her mark lines with a pen. Payment schedules that never existed. Invoices created to support a story already decided. This filing alone won't bankrupt you, Claire said, but it creates noise. Banks hesitate. Clients pause. Employees worry. They already are, I said. One account restricted. One client questioning stability. She nodded once. Exactly. I stared at my brother's name on the page. Nathan Hart, creditor. He didn't do this alone, I said. No, Claire replied. This required coordination. I thought of my father's questions about liability, my mother's sudden concern. The timing clicked into place with sickening clarity. Claire slid another document toward me. We prepared ahead of this. Quietly. What do you mean? Independent audits, forensic handwriting analysis, correspondence logs. We filed them preemptively. I looked up. Before the hearing. Yes, she said. Before they even knew we knew. I exhaled slowly. They think I'll react. I said, defend myself emotionally. They want you to. Claire replied, they want chaos. I remembered my father's voice. Calm. Certain. The way he equated discipline with punishment. I won't give them that. I said. Good, Claire replied, because the court doesn't reward outrage. It rewards clarity. My phone vibrated. A message from my mother. We're worried. This has gone further than anyone expected. I showed it to Claire. She didn't smile. They expected this. Another message followed, this time from my father. We need to talk. Privately. I set the phone face down. They're closing ranks, I said. They always do, Claire replied. When their story is threatened. I stood and walked to the window, my reflection faint in the glass. They're not trying to prove I failed, I said. They're trying to force the world to see me as reckless. Claire gathered the papers into neat stacks. And you're going to let the record show who actually took that risk. I nodded. Silence had protected me once. Now it was going to expose them. I did not call my family. Not to demand answers. Not to warn them. Not to ask why. Every instinct told me to speak. To correct the record before it spread any further. Claire told me not to. Silence works when the truth is documented, she said. Noise only helps the lie travel faster. So I stayed quiet. I spent the next days pulling records, emails, bank statements, audit summaries. Every clean trail I had insisted on keeping, even when no one thought it mattered. Maya came into my office late one evening. Payroll is still on schedule, she said. But people are nervous. I know. I replied, tell them we're stable. She hesitated. Do you want me to say more? No, I said. Say less. She nodded, trusting me without asking for details. That trust pressed heavier on my chest than the filing ever had. At home. Daniel watched me organize documents across the dining table. They're trying to bait you, he said. I won't take it, I replied. My phone lit up again. A voicemail from my mother this time. Her voice careful. No one wanted this to get out of hand, she said. We just want to protect everyone. I deleted it without responding. An hour later, a message from my father. Mistakes shouldn't define someone forever. I read it once and placed the phone back down. They're reframing, Daniel said quietly. They're rewriting. I corrected. The night before the hearing, Claire called. Everything is filed, she said. Audits, forensic reports, correspondence. We let the court see it before they perform. And now, I asked. Now we wait. She replied, let them step onto the stage they built. I looked around the room, papers neatly stacked, numbers clean, no panic, no rush. For years, I had stayed silent to survive. This time, silence wasn't survival, it was alignment. And in the morning, I would walk into that courtroom without needing to say a word. The courtroom felt colder than I remembered, not in temperature, but in attention. Every movement seemed observed, every pause recorded. My family arrived separately. My mother entered first, dressed in black, eyes already red as if grief had been scheduled. She avoided looking at me. My father followed, posture straight, gaze forward, not acknowledging my presence. Nathan came last, relaxed, speaking softly to his attorney, confidence still intact. Claire leaned toward me. "Stay still." Nathan's lawyer stood and began. "Your Honor, the defendant's company has shown a pattern of overextension and avoidance. This petition exists to protect legitimate creditors from further loss." My mother pressed a hand to her mouth. A quiet sob slipped through the room. "We supported her," Margaret said when given the chance to speak. "We tried to guide her. Watching her spiral has been heartbreaking." My father nodded once. Claire did not object. She didn't move. The judge reviewed the documents in silence. Pages turned. Pens paused. The weight of waiting pressed against my ribs. Then the judge stopped. He removed his glasses and placed them carefully on the bench. "Before this hearing," he said, "the court requested an independent financial overview." Nathan shifted in his seat. "The findings do not align with the petition." The judge continued. "Audited records show consistent growth, significant reserves, and no indicators of insolvency." Nathan's attorney leaned forward. "Your Honor, those records I am not finished," the judge said calmly. He lifted another document. The court also reviewed a forensic handwriting analysis submitted prior to this hearing. My mother's hand froze in her lap. The signatures attributed to the defendant do not match her handwriting. The room went silent. Nathan stood abruptly. "This is a misinterpretation." The judge's gaze did not move. "What concerns the court is not misinterpretation. It is fabrication." Claire rose. "The alleged obligations do not exist," she said evenly. "The invoices were never issued. The payments were never scheduled. This filing was designed to create disruption, not resolution." The judge nodded. "This petition is dismissed with prejudice," he said. "The matter will be referred for further review." Margaret reached for my arm as we stood. "We were trying to protect the family," she whispered. I met her eyes. "You were trying to control the truth." Behind me, my father said my name. I kept walking. The sound of the courtroom doors closing followed me down the hall. For the first time since this began, I felt my shoulders lower. The story they brought with them had collapsed under its own weight, and I hadn't needed to raise my voice to make it happen. The fallout did not arrive all at once. It moved quietly, the way consequences do when no one is left to protect them. Nathan stopped calling first. Then his attorney went silent. Claire mentioned reviews and follow-up inquiries without adding detail. She didn't need to. The absence of certainty said enough. A week later, Maya stepped into my office with a thin folder in her hand. "We cleared due diligence," she said. "The federal systems contract moved forward." I nodded once. "Good work." She hesitated. "People feel calmer." "So do I," I said. That evening, Daniel found me still at my desk after everyone else had gone home. "You don't look relieved," he said. "I am," I replied, just not in the way I expected. He leaned against the doorway. "They finally understand," I shook my head. "They don't have to." My phone buzzed once. A message from my father, carefully written, unfinished in its apology. I read it, then locked the screen without responding. Daniel watched me. "You're done." "Yes," I said, not angry. "Just finished." I turned off the lights and picked up my bag. The building was quiet, steady. still standing. If this story feels familiar, if you've ever been underestimated by the people who should have known you best, you're not alone. Stories like this exist because silence, patience, and truth leave marks that last. As we walked out together, Daniel reached for my hand. I didn't look back. What mattered was already walking forward with me.